Okay, before I go any further, I just want to talk to you a little bit about a change that I've made. The pattern had originally told me to cut one flat piece out of the lining fabric and one piece out of the cargo pants. And I was looking at it and thinking about it, and I didn't buy a different fabric for my bias, but I cut it instead out of that fabric that I had purchased. So I was thinking that when I edge the border of my cargo bag with this, when I flip it over, the other side of it is going to be lined with this really cool fabric. But then all my binding work that's going to go all the way around the edge, it's going to blend in. And I decided that's not what I wanted. So I'm going to make one change. I'm not going to use this piece, but I'll end up making a wallet out of it or something to go inside my bag, so that's not a big deal. So I'm putting that aside. So I have my pattern piece again, and I'm going to cut a piece of fabric out of my cargo pants so that I can put it on the back of this. So this is like the ugly side of the fabric, the wrong side of the fabric, and this is the right side. So I'm basically going to treat it so it will look the same, but I'm going to need a piece of fabric to hide this. But I didn't have a big enough piece left over from my pants after cutting everything else that I needed. So what I did is I pieced together a piece of fabric. So I've created a seam through here and a seam through there, and this one I purposefully kind of off-centered them, and I put the other ones over here. And now that I've pieced together this bigger piece of fabric, I'm going to be able to lay that pattern piece down, and I'm going to trace around it with a pen or one that's going to erase, and I'm going to go all the way around it, and then I'm going to cut it out, and I'm going to use this for the back side of my flap, and that way my bias trim is really going to stand out. I just want to show you how to prepare your bias tape. So these are the 2.5 inch wide strips that I have joined together, and I'm going to talk to you about how to press them. Okay, so you're going to press them. This time you're going to do it with the wrong sides together. You're going to fold it exactly in half, and you're going to press that, carefully matching it up all the way along. Because it's cut on the bias, this fabric can bend and stretch that much easier, and that's why we cut it on the bias. That's why we use this, so that as you're going around curves, you're able to bend this a little bit better, and it won't make wrinkles quite the same as if it has just been 2.5 inch long strips. So you're going to press it first like this, and then you're going to open it up, and you're going to take one side and you're going to fold it to meet that crease that's in the center, and you're going to go along and just press it along the edge, carefully again matching it up to that center crease. Once you've got this side pressed, you're going to take the other side and fold it over to match that center crease line as well. And you're going to press, and this time you can press everything together, and you might want to lift a little bit as you go so you don't shift those crease lines that are underneath it. Okay, you're going to go all the way along this way. Okay, so now you'll see that they're matching on this side. So it'll be, the good side will be on this side, and you'll have the two raw edges matching in the middle. Okay, let me just pick that up so you can see it a little bit better. So it looks kind of like this, then fold it over, and they're matching exactly in the middle. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you're going to fold that again. Okay, so you do that while it's lying on the ironing board, and I like to lay my tape on the lengthwise on the ironing board so I can work a little bit easier. Okay, so it's folded, and now those two folded edges are matching along the top, and then I've got the original fold over here, and I'm just going to run, and again keep double checking that those folds are matching up as you press all the way down. And that is a bias tape. Now you can purchase bias tape, but you can't always find the color that you want or a really cool design like this. So making your own is cheap, and you can use whatever you like. The other thing that's really cool about bias tape is you can buy a tool to do it. The only thing is, how often are you going to be making bias tape? And sometimes you might want to make them different widths and thicknesses. Sometimes you can get bias tape that's just teeny tiny like that. Same process, it's just you're going to be working with a thinner piece. And that tool, basically, you would insert this fabric in one side and it curls it, and when you pull it through that tube it actually comes out looking like this, and then you just press as it comes out the tube, and that's how you would make it. So it doesn't always have to be kind of a lengthy process like this is, but if you don't have the tool and you don't want to purchase it and you're making it yourself, this is the steps you're going to take. Okay, so you've done all of your cutting, you've prepared your handles, and you've, in terms of folding them into those long strips, and you've prepared your bias tape, and the first instructions are for you to make the front flap. So here's my front flap piece, and remember I switched from the lining, I pieced together another piece of fabric of the cargo pants, and I cut it out. So this is the good side here. You can see the finished seams and the good side. So we're pinning them together, wrong sides together, okay? So ugly sides together or wrong sides together, pretty sides out or right sides out, okay, depending upon your terminology. And I've just pinned it together here, and what she asks us to do in the instructions are we're supposed to piece it together, pin it together, and then we would put the bias tape on it. Because many of you are beginner sewers, at this point you might want to go to your sewing machine and just run a stitch really close to the edge all the way around, at about maybe a quarter away from the edges, because you're not going to want to have anything shifting on you. So you're going to do that on the sewing machine and then come back and we'll put the bias tape on and we'll sew that down. Alright, so I've gone around, as you can see, just a quarter of an inch away from the edge, or you could do, here, just kind of zoom in there for you, or less, okay? So you want to keep it nice and close to the edge, and I've joined those two pieces, and again, not in the instructions, but it will help with sliding, okay? That way you don't have to worry about that. So there's a pretty side here and a pretty side here. And now we're going to put our binding bias tape on. And I like to do it on the back side, and what we're going to do is you open up your bias tape and you're going to line it up with the edge of the fabric. Now see how it's cut on an angle here? You want to start with it kind of overhanging, and so the shortest point of it is off of your project, okay? And then you just pin it down. With those edges lining up. Got some thicknesses there. You're going to find you might have a problem putting the a pin through certain spots, again because the pockets and zippers and buckles and whatnot. Okay, so you're going to continue and you're going to go all the way around. It's going to get a little tricky at the corners, but it is biased cut tape, so just keep pinning it. You'll probably put quite a few pins in it, and just ease it around the corner as you go, as you pin. Okay, so it'll look kind of like that. It's going to stick up a little bit, but that's okay. And what we're going to do is right on that crease that we did, okay, and I'm just going to darken it with the blue here. That's the crease line, that's the fold, right? Here's that fold. I'm going to stitch right on that fold all the way around my project, and then we'll come back and I'll show you what we're going to do. Okay, so I'm on the machine and I just want to show you again what I'm doing. Again, the bias tape has been pinned to the edge of the fabric, and I've got the needle positioned right on the fold, which I just indicated for you with a couple blue marks. Again, first time sewers, you might want to do those blue marks, kind of like dot them along. Just make sure what you're using to mark it is something that's going to disappear with maybe heat or wash out, because you wouldn't want it to bleed through your fabric and show. The other thing is sometimes you can kind of, if you don't want to do that, another handy tip is I need to sew this, and the distance is 1/2 inch. That's what the distance of my fold is. So I've just placed a piece of tape along my machine. You can see if I pull it back, that piece of tape is just going to give me a real nice handy little guide so that I know where I'm supposed to be sewing as I'm going along. Okay, so those are some tips, and I just will sew along that fold, lining my fabric up as I go. So I finished sewing it all the way around, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it over top and then fold it around my piece and flip it over as I go, and then fold that raw end in to the middle again, and then fold it over the edge of my project. So you can see that this side is a finished side. There's the middle crease, and that side looks neat too, because that's where we sewed it down. And I'm just going to pull it all the way around, and I can see, hopefully you can see that, I can see the line of where I sewed it, and as long as this reaches that line and covers it, then we're good. I can just pin that down here. So I've done that all the way around. So this is the other side, you can see. And if you look, I've got lots of extra bias tape here. I can save that for another project. But I've pinned it all the way around, all the way to the other side. Now when you were sewing it, you probably had a little bit of difficulty with the corners. Just do the best you can, trying to navigate around it. And then when you pull it over, it's going to seem like it doesn't want to fit, as you can see here. So you're going to need to kind of tuck it flat in that corner and pull it, the bias tape up and over. But still sometimes it has like a lot of excess. So I'm going to show you a little trick for trying to gather it in a very neat and tidy way. I mean, you could just fold it over. You could just fold it over and pin it down. Okay, so you can see that I've pinned it, done all the flat parts, and now we're just going to try to fix some of the excess that's happening over here. So you can fold it over and press it, but you'll have lots of ripples in here. So one little trick is you're going to try to basically ease the fabric. Basically easing is almost like gathering it a little bit. So I've done it over here, and what I've done is I've used a pin, and I've just done like a figure 8 over and under the pin to hold it. I'm just going to pick this up so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, to hold it. And then I've gone almost like a slip stitch along the top edge, and then I pulled it to kind of gather it, helping it turn that corner, and then I did another pin, and I just did a figure 8 so I can just hold it in that position. And then I can press that. If I want, I can even do a little hand basting stitch. I know this sounds like a lot of steps, but for me it's going to be really important to have that edge as pretty as possible. So I'm going to show you how to do it over here. So I'm not going to start right away by putting the first pin in. I'm going to start by getting just the long string in that crease. So I'm going to go in to the top fold of my fabric, and I'm going to run along that fold, just again like a slip stitch, and I'm going to come out and I'm going to leave a nice long tail of thread hanging down. And see where I'm coming out of the top of the fold? I'm just going to go over like a millimeter or so, or 2, and I'm going to go straight back in the top of that fold, again along that channel. And I'm going about 1/4 of an inch along, and I'm going to come back out. Okay, just leave that tail hanging out in the back there. Same thing, I'm out the top, I'm going to go back in just a millimeter or 2 millimeters over. I'm going to go along about 1/4 of an inch or so. I'm going to come back out, back in through the top, along, out. Got caught on this one. Just gotta loosen that up. Okay. Back in through the top, along the fold, out through the top, in through the top, along that fold, out through the top. And I think I'm going to do one more, in through the top, along that fold, and out through the top. Maybe one more again. I want to make sure I'm out of the way of that turn. Okay, I'm happy with that. Alright, so as you can see, I've got the tail sticking out this side, and I've got a long string sticking out this side as well. So I'm just going to take a pin, and I'm going to pin that pin down here, perpendicular, and I'm going to take this thread, this is my base, and I'm just going to do that figure eight, over and under, and this is just going to secure this one side. Okay, and then on this side, I'm going to see how I've got lots of excess, and this fabric is nice and flat in there. I can just even hold it down with my fingers here, so that's not going to curl. And I'm going to pull the thread and see how it just drew all that fabric into a nice gentle curve. So again, loosen that up. See, I had all that flappy excess, and I grab this and keeping my fingers here nice and flat, that fabric's nice and flat, and I'm just going to pull it, and like magic, it just smooths that out. I'm going to keep the the thread taut in my hand as I grab another pin, and I'm just going to pin that pin down here. Okay, make sure I like that. And then I'm just going to do that same figure eight. Okay, over, under, over, under. And that's going to give me my nice tight corners. And no big folds and ugly looking pleats there. And that's just going to keep it really nice and neat. Now I can hand baste on top of that, or I can leave it, and when I'm sewing along, obviously these pins, I'm going to want to put them now perpendicular, getting ready for sewing. I can pull these pins out as I sew. I may want to leave this pin in as I sew very slowly over top of it, just to give my needle, if it lands on top of that pin, if I go slow, it's going to shift to the side of it. But I can leave that in, going around, again, slowly over top of that, and I'm going to change these pins perpendicular as well for when I'm sewing. Okay. The other thing I could do is I could give it a press right now. If I bring it to the ironing board and give it a press, that's also going to help make sure everything's going to lie nice and flat. And I'm going to sew just on the edge here, and I'm going to do a nice little edge stitching, and that's going to make it look really neat and professional. So I just finished my edge stitching all the way along the edge of my bias tape and gently around that corner, and I just, as I said, I pulled the other pins out, but I left these ones in, or at least the first one because I didn't want to lose it. But when I did the other side, I pulled it out just like after I had navigated the turn. So right when I got here, I pulled this one out, just because I didn't want to deal with all the thread after. But as you can see, if I grab the end and I give it a pull, the thread kind of comes out of that little bunch. So it's not that difficult to deal with. And if I give it a bit of a pull here, I'm going to be able to just pull that right out. I'm just doing this one-handed because I'm holding the camera with the other, and it came right out. So that's not even a problem at all. And I can give it another press if I need to, or actually this is sitting really nice because I pressed it before I stitched it, so that looks really good. I do that to the other side. The other thing I may want to do is I've done one row of stitching, but maybe you might like to have 2 rows of stitching. That's personal preference, so that's your choice. But as you can see, it's looking pretty good already, and I just have to pull this string out from the other corner, and it's going to look pretty good. And so I can set that aside and I can start working on the lining of the bag. So here's my finished flap. I have the excess or extra couple inches of the bias tape, but I can trim that off later, so I'm not worrying about that. I did decide to, do 2 stitches. I thought it might look really cool. I'm happy with the way it looks, and I'm going to set that aside and work on the lining.